So this is for the people that had the dogs tear into their sheetrock. I'm going to show you a totally different way of coming about fixing this. There's a lot of good videos out there on YouTube that you can look at. All of them do it almost the right way, not quite the right way. I'm going to show you a way that's probably not right at all, but it really works. So anyhow, here's what we do. Make sure you tear off all of the paper that is on the edge. Make sure that everything is flat. Kind of push in with the sandpaper towards the hole, making sure that all the paper is going in and there's nothing coming out, because then you're going to have an issue sanding it later on. This first fix is we're pretending like there's no insulation in the walls at all. So if you take a screw with some insulation and just push it in there, just so that the paper is coming out just a little bit. You can take what's called hot mud. Now this isn't hot mud, this is just an example. I didn't have any with me. It's called quick setting mud, hot mud. There's 5-minute mud that'll set up in 5 minutes, 10-minute mud that'll set up in 10, so on and so forth. It goes up to like 90 minutes or more. So I think that's about the extent that it goes up to. So anyway, take your hot mud and just kind of push it in on the edges all the way around. That way your insulation can set up. Don't go all the way above the surface, just a little bit, so you can let it set up. Now let's pretend that it's already set up. It's really hard. It's 10 minutes later. You can go ahead and unscrew that now, and it's all, all up in there, and it's all good. Now you can take a little bit of mud that you can finish with, get some more, get like 5-minute mud, 20-minute mud, or something like that, and you can smooth out the top of it. Now by the end of this, you do this, this time, and then there's still going to be some holes left. What you're going to do is you're going to take your big knife and finish it off by putting some in there and then scraping it off, so you have a nice even plane. So that's for small holes. I think that's a quick fix. There's another way to do that I'll show you on the back side when I'm done with this example. So the next example is your top one here. The dogs really did a number. Well, let's use the same principle. I'll be honest with you, I've never really tried this part before, but I thought that this was a good idea. I kind of came up with it while I was thinking about it last night, what other ways there would be to go ahead and fix this problem if you didn't have if you didn't have anything that you could cut with, if you didn't have a circular saw with you, something like that. All you had was some insulation or something that you could put in there that is fire resistant. So you thrust that down in there, and if you need more, just grab it, cut a second piece. You got it in there real good, it's not coming out very much, go ahead and grab your second piece that you cut. You're going to probably have to lift it so that you can push it in and tuck it at the same time. Now, you don't want this protruding. You just want it inside so that you're not going to be sanding a surface that just has a bunch of insulation coming out. So you can do the same thing on the edges. You want to make sure that that's really solid in there. So I'm getting all these edges with that 5-minute mud, because that paper on that insulation is now going to adhere with that mud to the paper on the back side of this sheetrock. Now, all you have to do, hopefully you have a large knife, grab one at Home Depot or wherever. Now grab your 5-minute mud or whatever you have. Now just stick it in there. stick it in the edges, stick it in the crevices. You're going to do it this first time. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to be a lot better than it was. And then the next time you do it, after it sets up in about 10 minutes, it'll start to turn like a harder clay. And so before it turns into an extremely hard surface, maybe 10-minute mark or just a few minutes past the expiration of your mud, you can start to actually manipulate it and mess with it, and even do a little bit of sanding on it so that you can get it really smooth on the edges. You want it really smooth and tapered on the edges, so that then after that you can paint it. So let's turn this around. And now we have an example of maybe we're going to do this a little bit more proper than the other one. But let's start with the bottom hole. We're pretending like there's insulation. Say you're obviously on the back side of the insulation. One way that I've worked this, a lot of people when they cut a hole in the wall for like blowing in insulation, they'll take the plug, they'll put it back in there, and if you've ever tried this before, you'll realize it's really hard to sand that. It's really hard to get it back in place. What I've done in the past is I've taken this, this is the Loctite version of the foam insulation. I'm going to see if this one will work. This is the old one. So you take this new one here and you get in all the edges so that you have a lot of backing to it. And here in a few minutes we'll be able to just pop that right off, or you can take it and sand it smooth or whatever. But hopefully you can get to it before it totally hardens, because then it's a lot harder to get to. But if you get it to where it's not quite hard yet, it's still a little bit pliable, you can pop that right off, and then you have a concave surface that you can now put in your mud. So the next example is going to be a lot more proper. And I just did it in the triangle to show you it really doesn't matter, that you do a square or anything like that. So a lot of what I've seen on YouTube, they'll like place the block right in the middle, or they'll place it on one side or something like that. Basically, to do this properly, if you will, you're going to need to take and get a lot of surface. If you can go all the way around with pieces of wood here, here, and here, that would be best. But for this example, there was so much surface on this wood, I didn't worry about it. Now you're going to be messing with your insulation a little bit. Hopefully you don't drop it all the way in or whatever. You can take and put a screw there so you can lift it up easier and that kind of a thing. So we're going to take this and we're going to screw it all in. Just make it so the screws barely dimple the wood. My setting for this drill is a 6. Each of them are going to be a little bit different. And now what you can do if you want, you can do weird things. You can put foam in there. You can cover it over after that with 5-minute mud, or you can do it a lot more proper, like we're showing. And I cut the top part of this to show you that it doesn't have to be perfect. If you'll know what they're really doing in most of your houses, it's really not that perfect, to be honest. And so you can fill that up with mud, and it's no big deal. Now, typically I would go ahead and screw this. I'm not going to show you that. It'd take more time. So now, what do we have here? So we've got that. Now we've got our tape. And usually, I don't know, there's a lot of people who won't do the tape, but if you'll take this tape, if you get tape that had some adhesive to it, you go like this, and you do this all the way around, but there's a lot to this, because the problem with this, which is no problem at all, it's very acceptable. But the problem to this, now you have a surface that's protruding that now you have to worry about sanding into, because once you sand into that, then you have these places that are ridges on your wall. Then now you have to put more of this mud on, which is no big deal. It's the proper way to do it. And you just fill this in. I would suggest doing 5-minute mud, doing the or 10 or 15-minute mud if you're not used to it, maybe or 20-minute mud. Now I would grab a piece of plastic or anything that you can so that your hands don't get on this stuff, because it's really gooey. It's maybe a little bit early to do this, but I'll show you. Now it is not even above the surface, it's into the surface, concave, so now that I can mess with it. Now, I would let that harden for a while, because if you don't let that harden, you're going to have issues because it'll start cracking your mud. So after it hardens, I leave it for a really long time. Look at the recommendations. It probably says, I don't know, 4 hours before doing anything to it, but it's really not for this application, so you might not find it on there. So point being, after a few hours, go ahead and fill that in, and fill it in all directions, and there you go. You're going to have to sand it down, you're going to have to smooth it out, you're going to have to put a little bit more on the outside or whatever. And if you can see already, since we didn't wait till it was time, it's starting to come out a little bit, which is fine, because even if you end up doing that, you can still sand that off, or you can cut it off, or whatever. But you really should wait. So anyway, that's the video on how to do that with totally different ways than you're probably going to see, and totally different than I've actually ever done before. So some of it's proper, some of it's not. Either way, it's really going to work. So thank you.